He suspected his maid was stealing from him. For 3 weeks, he watched her leave his penthouse, struggling with heavy grocery bags she didn't arrive with. So one rainy evening, he followed her, ready to expose her. What he discovered shattered everything he believed about success. Pan Kwan was 32 years old and owned the skyline of Seoul. He tracked every decimal point, every quarterly report, every inefficiency in his empire except the woman who had kept his world turning for 20 years. Her name was Mary Beth Oscar. She'd been with his family since he was 12. When his mother was dying of cancer, Mary Beth sat beside her bed through the long hospital nights. When his father grew cold and distant after the funeral, she kept the household from collapsing. She cared for him when silence filled every room, but Pan never asked about her life. Never wondered where she disappeared to after her shift ended at 6 p.m. She was simply there, dependable, quiet, invisible until 3 weeks ago. Pan noticed Mary Beth leaving the service elevator every Tuesday evening, carrying 2 bulging shopping bags. Bags she hadn't brought in that morning. It kept happening. Tuesday, then Thursday, then Monday. Same bags, same struggle, same tired walk. His mind went to dark places. She's taking something. He ran a mental audit. The imported wines in his cellar untouched. The premium cuts of beef in his Sub-Zero accounted for. His home office safe locked and undisturbed. Nothing was missing. But those bags kept appearing. And the question burned in his chest like acid. What is she hiding? So, on a rainy Thursday evening, Pan decided to follow her. He left his office at Pancorp Tower early, changed from his executive suit into his navy blue, one less conspicuous but still sharp, and waited in his Mercedes 3 blocks down. When Mary Beth emerged from the building, coat pulled tight against the rain, those bags pulling her shoulders down, Pan's jaw clenched. Tonight, I'll know the truth. She took the subway south, deep into neighborhoods his development company had acquired, blocks his firm was about to bulldoze, areas he'd only seen on demolition permits. She got off at Yeongdeungpo Station, turned down a narrow alley behind a half-collapsed building walls stained with water damage, windows covered with plywood. Mary Beth knocked 3 times. The door opened. Yellow light spilled onto the wet pavement. Pan waited, collar up, rain drumming on his shoulders. Then he followed her inside. The basement was packed with people, elderly, men in threadbare clothes, frail women wrapped in donated blankets, all gathered around a makeshift kitchen area eating soup from mismatched bowls. And there was Mary Beth, hair uncovered, wearing an old cardigan he'd never seen, standing over a portable electric stove, ladling broth, calling people by name, smiling in a way Pan had never witnessed. An old man with a cane shuffled forward. "Miss Mary Beth, did you bring the kimchi?" "Made it myself, Mr. Choi. Extra spicy, just how you like it." She handed him a container wrapped in newspaper. A small girl, maybe 7 years old, tugged at Mary Beth's sleeve. "Auntie, where does the food come from?" Mary Beth crouched down to the child's level. "I cook it with love, sweetheart, so you grow up healthy and strong." Pan couldn't breathe. His lungs felt compressed. His vision narrowed. Those bags weren't stolen. They were bought. Mary Beth was spending her own salary money he paid her to feed strangers who had nothing. People his company was about to displace. She could have asked him for funding, could have requested a charitable donation. But she didn't, because after 20 years of service, she'd made a quiet decision about the man she worked for. She didn't trust him with her compassion. Pan stumbled backward up the concrete stairs. Rain hammered his face, mixing with something else he couldn't name. He sat in his car for 2.5 hours, engine off, watching the door. When Mary Beth finally emerged, bags empty now, steps slower, shoulders sagging, Pan lowered his window. "Mary Beth." She turned. No shock registered on her face, just quiet, resigned sadness. "Get in." She did. They drove in silence through the neon-lit streets. Rain streaked the windows. Finally, Pan's voice came out rough, unfamiliar. "How long have you been doing this?" Mary Beth kept her eyes on the passing city. 23 years. Since the economic crisis took everything from them. He'd been 9 years old then, playing video games while the country collapsed around him. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and her voice was gentle but cutting. "What would you have done, Mr. Pan? Made a press release? Turned their suffering into your tax write-off?" Her words landed like a slap. "I wanted them to stay human, not become another line item in your corporate social responsibility report." Something cracked open inside Pan's chest, something that had been sealed shut since his father taught him that profit was the only measure of worth. He drove her to a small house in Guro district, walked her to the gate. Through the window, he saw a frame on the wall, a faded certificate from Seoul National University Hospital, the Nurse Excellence Award, presented to Mary Beth Oscar for extraordinary patient advocacy during the 2002 corporate malpractice scandal. The woman who scrubbed his floors every morning had risked her career to protect dying patients, and he never knew. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. My mother said I'd never even reach 1,000 subscribers. But I believe stories like this, stories about seeing the invisible people around us, deserve to be heard. Help me prove that these tales matter. Pan didn't go home that night. He sat in his Mercedes outside Mary Beth's house until dawn began to break over the Han River. The rain had stopped. The city was exhaling, preparing for another day, and all he could see was that certificate on her wall. Extraordinary patient advocacy. She'd fought a system that devoured people, and he'd become that system. When he finally drove back to his penthouse in Gangnam, the sun was rising over Namsan Tower. The building's security system recognized his car like it always did, gates sliding open, lobby lights brightening, private elevator descending. But this time, it all felt different, sterile, automated, like a machine pretending to be a home. Pan stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. His Seoul, towers bearing the Pancorp logo across 3 districts. Buildings that reshaped neighborhoods, that erased history, that made him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. But what had he actually built? He thought about Mary Beth. 20 years. She'd been the constant in his life since childhood. He remembered being 12, standing in the hospital corridor outside his mother's room, too afraid to go in. The chemo had changed her, made her a stranger. His father was on a business call, always a business call. But Mary Beth took Pan's hand, walked him inside, sat him down beside the bed, and whispered, "She's still your mother. She still needs you." He remembered being 16, studying for university entrance exams, the pressure crushing him. His father's expectations were impossible. The tutors were relentless. He broke down one night at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., head in his hands. Mary Beth found him. She didn't understand advanced calculus, but she made him tea, sat across from him and said, "You're already enough, whatever happens." He remembered being 20, the day his father died. Pan inherited everything, the company, the assets, the crushing weight of legacy. He stood in his father's office that evening, unable to cry, unable to feel anything. Mary Beth came in with a tray of untouched food. She set it down, looked at him with those steady eyes, and said simply, "He was proud of you, even if he never knew how to say it." And Pan had built his empire on that foundation, had transformed Pancorp from a mid-tier construction firm into a development powerhouse, had made strategic acquisitions, streamlined operations, maximized shareholder value, but he'd never asked if Mary Beth was proud, never asked what she needed, never asked if she was okay. The realization sat in his chest like concrete. Pan heard the front door's electronic lock disengage, soft footsteps in the marble hallway. Mary Beth was here, 6 a.m. precisely, same as always, dependable, faithful, invisible. He turned from the window and walked toward the kitchen, his reflection following him in the polished floors, a man who'd spent 20 years blind in his own home. Pan stood in his walk-in closet, fingertips grazing the sleeve of his navy blue suit. Not the charcoal Ermenegildo Zegna he wore to board meetings, not the midnight Tom Ford reserved for investor dinners. The blue one. Expensive enough to belong, ordinary enough to disappear. He dressed methodically, each button a small commitment to what he was about to do. The silk tie felt like a noose. In the mirror, he looked like every other corporate man riding the subway home after a long day. Invisible. That was the point. His hands were steady, but something in his chest felt irregular, arrhythmic. He told himself this was about protecting his assets, about confirming suspicions, about catching a thief red-handed so he could terminate her employment cleanly, legally, without sentiment. But deep down, beneath the justifications, there was something uglier. A need to be right about her, to prove that trust was always misplaced, that everyone had a price, a breaking point, a moment when their mask slipped. Pan left through the service entrance, the one Mary Beth used every day. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd never walked through this door before. It opened onto a concrete stairwell that smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarette smoke. His building had 2 worlds, the marble lobby where residents entered, and this gray backbone where the people who sustained their lives moved like ghosts. He reached the street just as Mary Beth emerged from the building's side door. She moved slowly, those 2 bags already weighing her down, and Pan felt a flicker of something not quite guilt, not quite concern. Curiosity, maybe, or the thrill of surveillance. He followed at a distance, collar turned up despite the mild evening. She walked 3 blocks to Gangnam Station, and Pan realized he hadn't ridden the subway in 7 years. Since before his father died, since before the company became his obsession, the station entrance swallowed her, and Pan descended into the fluorescent underworld of Seoul's transit system. The air was thick with bodies, the smell of commerce and sweat, and street food from the vendors lining the corridors. Mary Beth moved through it like a river stone, steady, unhurried, invisible to the rushing commuters who parted around her without seeing her. Pan bought a ticket with cash, something he had to think about. When was the last time he'd carried cash? His cards did everything. His phone unlocked everything. Money had become abstract, digital, a concept, rather than paper in his palm. He boarded 3 cars behind her on the southbound Line 2 train. Through the windows, he could see her seated near the door, bags at her feet, head tilted back against the window. She looked exhausted. He realized he'd never actually studied her face before. The lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her hair at the temples, the way her shoulders curved inward, protecting something fragile inside. How old was she? He didn't know. Mid-50s? 60? He'd never asked. The train lurched forward, and Pan gripped the overhead rail, surrounded by people who lived in a Seoul he'd forgotten existed. Students with heavy backpacks, their eyes closed, stealing sleep between academy classes. Day laborers in paint-stained clothes, hands rough and capable. Office workers staring at their phones, faces illuminated by blue light, exhausted by different kinds of labor. When had he stopped being one of them? When had the glass wall gone up between his life and theirs? Mary Beth got off at Yeongdeungpo Station. Pan's stomach tightened. He knew that name from the reports his development team brought him. Sector 9. Approved for demolition. A parking structure was scheduled to break ground in 48 hours. He'd signed the permits himself without looking at the location photos. Just another acquisition. Another optimization of underutilized urban space. He followed her up the stairs into the rain. When had it started raining? He'd been so focused on her that he hadn't noticed the weather changing. The drops came down cold and steady, turning the streets glossy, reflecting the neon signs of convenience stores and PC bangs, and pojangmatcha tents selling soju to men who couldn't afford to go home yet. Mary Beth walked deeper into the maze of narrow streets. The buildings grew older here, shorter, closer together. Laundry hung from windows despite the rain. The smell changed cooking odors, mildew, the sweetness of rotting garbage waiting for collection. Pan's shoes, handmade Italian leather, stepped into puddles he would have avoided in his own neighborhood. His suit was getting soaked. He didn't care. Or rather, he cared. But his need to know was stronger than his discomfort. This was his city, his soul. But walking these streets, he felt like a foreigner. Every corner revealed his ignorance. He'd spent 10 years reshaping the skyline, moving billions in capital, approving projects that changed neighborhoods overnight. But he'd never walked through them. Never smelled them, never felt the uneven pavement under his feet, or heard the sounds of real life happening in windows above him. Mary Beth turned down an alley behind what looked like an abandoned church. Paint peeling in long strips, windows covered with plywood tagged with graffiti. A condemned notice plastered across the door, one of his company's notices. He realized with a sick twist in his gut. She knocked 3 times. A pattern, a signal. Pan pressed himself against the wet brick wall, heart hammering. This was it. The moment of truth, the black market operation, the stolen goods, the proof he needed. The door opened. Yellow light spilled out, warm against the cold rain. Mary Beth disappeared inside. Pan stood in the rain, water running down his face, his expensive suit clinging to him like shame. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to return to his penthouse, dry off, forget this impulse, fire her in the morning with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. But his feet moved forward. He crossed the alley, reached the door, and without letting himself think about what he was doing or why, he followed her down into the light. Pan judged her before he knew the truth. If you believe we should never judge a book by its cover, hit subscribe. If you're not one of those people who looks down on hard workers, comment respect below. Only the arrogant will skip this. The stairs descended into warmth. Not the climate-controlled precision of Pan's penthouse, but something more elemental, the warmth of bodies gathered together, of steam rising from pots, of breath and life concentrated in a small space against the cold outside. Pan moved slowly, each step taking him deeper into a world he'd never imagined existed beneath his city. The concrete walls were bare except for water stains that mapped decades of neglect. A single bulb hung from a wire, casting yellow light that made everything look older, softer, more forgiving than the LED precision he lived under. He reached the bottom and pressed himself into the shadows near the base of the stairs. His breath caught. The basement stretched wider than he'd expected, maybe 40 feet across, with a low ceiling held up by concrete pillars wrapped in peeling paint. But it was the people that stopped his heart. 20, maybe 25 of them. Elderly men and women sitting on folding chairs and overturned crates. Some wrapped in blankets that had seen better decades. Others in layers of mismatched clothing that spoke of donations and desperation. And there, in the center of it all, was Mary Beth. She'd set her bags on a makeshift table constructed from plywood and sawhorses. Her coat hung on a nail driven into the wall. She wore that old cardigan he'd glimpsed earlier, the color of faded moss, and her hair was uncovered, pulled back with a simple elastic band. She looked different here. Lighter, like she'd shed some invisible weight the moment she'd crossed the threshold. Pan watched as she began unpacking the bags. Not jewelry, not imported wines, not his mother's silver that he'd inventoried in his mind 100 times. Vegetables. Fresh vegetables still beaded with water from the market. Carrots and radishes, bundles of spinach, green onions tied with rubber bands, a plastic container of tofu, packages of ramen noodles, a bottle of sesame oil. She'd bought them. Spent her own money, the money he paid her, probably half her monthly salary on groceries for strangers. Mary Beth moved to a portable electric stove set up on a concrete block. 2 large pots waited there, and she filled one with water from a jerry can, added the vegetables with practiced efficiency. She didn't measure anything. Her hands knew the proportions. How many times had she done this? An elderly man shuffled forward, his spine curved like a question mark, one hand gripping a wooden cane that looked homemade. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had once been much larger. "Miss Mary Beth," he said, his voice rough but warm. "You came in the rain again. Mr. Choi, I always come. You know that." She smiled at him, and Pan realized he'd never seen her smile like that. Open, unguarded. Sit down before your knees give you trouble. My knees gave me trouble 20 years ago. But Mr. Choi lowered himself onto a folding chair with a grunt of relief. "What are you making tonight?" "Vegetable soup with tofu, and I brought extra ramyeon for anyone who wants it." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the room. Pan pressed deeper into the shadows, something hot and uncomfortable building in his throat. These people knew her, really knew her, called her by name, expected her, relied on her. An elderly woman with white hair cut short like a boy's approached the table. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose bones hurt with every step. "Mary Beth C. Did you remember the kimchi?" "Mrs. Bake, when have I ever forgotten?" Mary Beth pulled out a plastic container from the second bag. "I made it 3 days ago so it would be perfect tonight. Extra spicy, just how you like it." The woman's face crumpled with gratitude, and she touched Mary Beth's hand, just a brief pressure, but the gesture carried volumes. "You're too good to us. You raised 4 children and worked in a factory for 30 years. You deserve good kimchi." Mary Beth's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Pan's legs felt weak. He leaned against the cold wall, his wet suit forgotten. The demolition permits he'd signed flashed through his mind. This building, this exact building, 48 hours from now, bulldozers would be here. The parking structure project, Phase 1 of the Yeongdangpo Urban Renewal Initiative. He'd approved it in a 5-minute presentation. Nodded at the PowerPoint slides showing revenue projections and return on investment. Never asked what occupied the space now. Never thought to ask. A small girl materialized at Mary Beth's side, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a pink jacket, 2 sizes too large. Her hair was tangled, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. She tugged on Mary Beth's cardigan. "Auntie, where does the food come from?" Mary Beth knelt down, bringing herself to the child's height. Her knees cracked audibly, but her face showed only tenderness. "I cook it with love, sweetheart. With so much love that it makes you grow strong and healthy. You want to grow strong, don't you?" The girl nodded solemnly. "Then you eat every bite tonight, and tomorrow you'll be even stronger." "But where do you get it? The food?" Pan held his breath, waiting. Mary Beth tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "I get it from the market, the same place your grandmother used to shop. Remember? She told you about the market? She said we used to go there, Before. The girl's voice dropped to a whisper on that last word. Before. Before whatever catastrophe had brought her here. That's right. And one day, you'll go there again. But tonight you let me take care of you. Okay? The girl wrapped her arms around Mary Beth's neck, and Pan watched his maid, his employee, the woman whose life he'd never asked about in 20 years, hold this child like she was precious, like she mattered. The soup began to boil. Steam rose in clouds, carrying the smell of vegetables and sesame oil and something else Pan couldn't name. Comfort, maybe. Or the opposite of the loneliness he lived with every day in his glass tower. Mary Beth stood, her knees protesting again, and began ladling soup into a collection of mismatched bowls. Plastic takeout containers, chipped ceramic, an old metal camping pot. The people lined up without being asked, each taking a bowl with both hands, bowing slightly, expressing gratitude that seemed too large for soup. But it wasn't about the soup, Pan realized. It was about being seen. Being remembered. Having someone show up week after week, in rain and cold, to prove that they weren't forgotten. Pan looked down at his hands, his manicured nails, his Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Mary Beth earned in 2 years, his Italian leather shoes ruined by puddles he could have avoided. He'd spent the entire evening assuming she was a thief, constructing elaborate theories about black market operations and stolen goods, ready to fire her, ready to feel righteous about it. And all along she'd been feeding people with her own money. People he was about to make homeless. The woman with the white hair, Mrs. Bake, sat down with her soup, and Pan saw tears running down her weathered face. She wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying because someone had remembered she liked spicy kimchi. Pan backed up the stairs slowly, carefully, his vision blurring. The rain outside felt colder now, or maybe he just felt it more. His throat was tight. His chest ached with something that felt like grief, but different. Sharper. More like shame. He made it to the alley before his legs gave out. He leaned against the wet brick wall of the condemned building, his building, and finally understood what Mary Beth had been doing all these years. She'd been being human, and he'd forgotten how. Pan didn't know how long he stood in that alley, rain soaking through his suit, running down his face like the tears he couldn't shed. The yellow light from the basement window cast shifting shadows on the wet pavement, and he watched them dance, unable to move, unable to think beyond the simple, devastating truth he'd just witnessed. He should leave, return to his car, drive back to Gangnam, pretend this night never happened. But his feet wouldn't obey. The door opened behind him. Pan spun around, heart hammering, pressing himself against the wall. An elderly man emerged, shuffling slowly, a plastic bag in his hand. He wore a suit jacket that might have been expensive once, decades ago, now shiny at the elbows and frayed at the cuffs. He stopped under the small overhang, fumbling in his pockets for something. Pan held his breath, willing himself invisible. The man found a crumpled pack of cigarettes, extracted one with trembling fingers. He lit it with a cheap plastic lighter, the flame illuminating his face for just a moment. Deep lines, hollow cheeks, eyes that had seen too much. "You can stop hiding," the man said without turning around. His voice was educated, the accent of old soul money. "I saw you on the stairs 20 minutes ago. You're not as subtle as you think." Pan's throat closed. He said nothing. The man took a drag, exhaled smoke that the rain immediately dispersed. "You look like someone. Can't quite place it." He turned then, and his eyes, sharp despite their age, studied Pan's face. "The suit's expensive, custom-tailored. Italian shoes, though they're ruined now. You're not a social worker, not a reporter, so that leaves." Recognition hit the man's face like a physical blow. The cigarette nearly fell from his fingers. "You're him. You're Pan Kwan." Pan wanted to run, wanted to deny it, wanted to be anywhere but here, facing this ghost from a world he'd tried to forget. "You don't remember me," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Why would you?" "I was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Just one of the 47 employees your father let go in the 2015 restructuring." The words hit Pan like stones. 2015. He'd been 21, fresh out of university, working in his father's office for the first time, learning the business. His father had called it trimming the fat, making the company lean and competitive. Pan had sat in those meetings, watched the presentations, seen the names scroll by on PowerPoint slides, but they'd been just names, abstract, necessary casualties of progress. "I was your father's senior accountant," the man continued. His voice was steady, but something trembled underneath it. Worked for him for 18 years. Bien Sang-woo. You might not remember me, but I remember you. Little boy running around the office on Saturdays while your father worked. I gave you candy once, red bean pastries from the bakery downstairs. Pan did remember. Vaguely. A kind man with glasses who'd let him use the calculator at his desk, who'd shown him how numbers could tell stories. Mr. Byun, Pan whispered. So you do remember. Byun took another drag, his hand still shaking. I'm surprised. Most people who become successful spend a lot of energy forgetting where they came from, who they stepped on to get there. I didn't, Pan started, but Byun cut him off with a bitter laugh. You didn't know. Of course you didn't. You were young, learning the family business, following your father's example. He gestured at the building behind them with his cigarette. I lost everything in 6 months. The severance barely covered 1 month's rent. No one would hire a 58-year-old accountant. Too old to retrain, too young to retire. My wife got sick, the medical bills. He trailed off, staring at the rain. She died 3 years ago, and I ended up here. Pan felt like he was falling, even though his feet were planted on solid ground. I'm sorry, I didn't know. That this building was full of people? Byun's eyes were hard now, glittering in the dim light. Or that you owned it, or that you're about to bulldoze it. The world tilted. What? Sector 9. That's what your company calls it, right? I saw the demolition notice last week. 48 hours from now, the bulldozers come. We're supposed to vacate. Find somewhere else to go. He laughed again, the sound empty. As if there's anywhere left for people like us. Pan's mind raced. The Yeongdeungpo project. The parking structure. Phase 1 of the Urban Renewal Initiative. He'd signed those permits 3 weeks ago. Approved the timeline. Director Ryu had pushed for an accelerated schedule, said they needed to move fast before real estate prices adjusted. Pan had agreed without looking at the details. He never looked at the details. How many people are living here? Pan heard himself ask. 23, last count. Could be more. People come and go. Some die. Some find a way out. Byun dropped his cigarette, crushed it under a shoe that had a hole in the sole. Mary Beth's been keeping us alive, bringing food twice a week, sometimes 3 times when she can afford it. She's the only reason most of us are still breathing. Why didn't anyone tell me? Byun looked at him like he was insane. Tell you? Tell Pan Kwan, CEO of Pancorp, that his parking lot used to be someone's home? You think we have your phone number? You think we can just walk into your tower and ask for an appointment? He shook his head. Besides, men like you don't listen. You see buildings, not people. Profit margins, not lives. The words were acid. Truth often was. The demolition, Pan said, his voice hoarse. It's scheduled for Thursday morning, 6 a.m. They posted the final notice yesterday. We have 48 hours to pack up our lives and disappear. Byun's voice cracked on the last word. Mrs. Baek is 81 years old. Mr. Choi can barely walk. That little girl you probably saw down there? Her grandmother died last month. She has nowhere else to go. And in 48 hours, we're all supposed to just vanish. Make it convenient for you. Pan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, he pulled it out, water droplets spattering the screen. 15 messages from Director Ryu. All variations on the same theme. Construction crews confirmed for Thursday, 6 a.m. All permits finalized. Media opportunity at 10 a.m. This will be excellent for Q4 optics. Pan stared at the messages. At his own company's efficiency. At the machine he'd built that could erase 23 lives without him even noticing. You're going to stop it, aren't you? Byun's voice had changed, softer now. Almost hopeful, though he was trying to hide it. You followed Mary Beth here. You saw what she's doing. You saw us. You're going to... I don't know, Pan said. The honesty surprised him. I don't know what I'm going to do. Byun nodded slowly, the hope draining from his face like water down a gutter. That's what I thought. You're your father's son, after all. He turned back toward the door. I should get back inside. It's warmer down there, and the soup's getting cold. Mr. Byun, Pan called out. The man paused. What would it take to make this right? Byun looked back over his shoulder. In the yellow light spilling from the basement window, he looked ancient, tired beyond measure. More than you have, Mr. Pan. It would take more than you have. He disappeared back inside, leaving Pan alone in the rain with his ruined shoes and his expensive phone and the crushing weight of 48 hours counting down like a death sentence. Pan's company was about to destroy their only home for a parking lot. If you believe people matter more than profits, hit the like button. Show director Ryu that we don't stand with greed. If you side with the heartless, just keep scrolling. Pan didn't remember driving home. One moment he was standing in the rain outside Sector 9, watching Byung-sung Woo disappear back into the warmth. The next he was sitting in his Mercedes in the underground parking garage of his building, engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes. His phone kept buzzing. Director Ryu again, then his assistant, then the VP of development. All of them celebrating the Youngdeungpo timeline, praising his decisive leadership, discussing the media strategy for the groundbreaking. The words blurred together into white noise. Pan finally forced himself out of the car. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, the mirrored walls reflecting a man he barely recognized. Soaking wet, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes that looked haunted. The penthouse greeted him with its usual climate-controlled perfection. 72 degrees, low ambient lighting. The soft hum of expensive appliances maintaining their invisible vigil. Everything exactly as it should be. Everything wrong. Pan stripped off his ruined suit in the bathroom, letting the fabric fall to the marble floor in a wet heap. $2,000. He'd spent more than Mary Beth's monthly salary on a suit he'd destroyed in one night. The irony made him sick. He stood under the shower until the water ran cold, but he couldn't wash away what he'd seen. Mrs. Baek crying over kimchi. The little girl asking where food came from. Mr. Choi with his homemade cane. Byung-sung Woo, his father's accountant, living in a condemned building because Pan's family had decided he was expendable. And Mary Beth. Mary Beth cooking soup for 23 people with her own money while he'd suspected her of theft. Pan didn't sleep. He sat in his office chair, still damp, staring at the city lights until they blurred into streaks of color. At 5:30 a.m., he heard it. The electronic lock on the service entrance. Soft footsteps in the hallway. She was here. Pan's heart hammered as he walked toward the kitchen. He found her there, already in her uniform, tying an apron around her waist. Her movements were practiced, automatic. She'd done this 10,000 times, maybe more. Mary Beth. She froze, turned slowly. Her face showed no surprise, just a deep, tired resignation. Mr. Pan, you're up early. I followed you last night. The words hung in the air between them. Mary Beth's hands stilled on the apron strings. She didn't flinch, didn't deny it, just looked at him with those steady eyes that had seen more than he'd ever imagined. I know, she said quietly. You know, Mr. Byun called me around midnight. Said you'd been there, standing in the rain. She turned back to the counter, began measuring coffee grounds with hands that trembled slightly. I figured you'd fire me this morning. I've been preparing for it. Pan felt like he'd been slapped. Fire you? Mary Beth, It's all right, Mr. Pan. Her voice was calm, professional. The voice she'd used for 20 years. I understand. You have your reputation to consider. Your company's image. Having an employee who associates with squatters, who feeds homeless people in buildings you own, it's not a good look. That's not. Pan stopped, took a breath. Why didn't you tell me? About Sector 9. About what you were doing. Mary Beth's hands paused over the coffee maker. Tell you what, exactly? That you were using your salary to feed people, that they were living in my building, that they needed help. She turned then, and her expression was something Pan had never seen before. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more final. And what would you have done, Mr. Pan? Her voice was soft but edged with steel. Written a check? Made a donation so you could feel good about yourself? Told me it was very noble and then gone back to signing demolition permits? I would have helped. No. The word was absolute. You would have helped the way powerful men always help. On your terms, with conditions, with publicity. You would have turned their suffering into your redemption story. She poured water into the coffee maker, her movements mechanical. I've watched you for 20 years. Watched you become your father. Watched you learn to see people as assets or liabilities. Nothing in between. The words cut deeper because they were true. They're people I know, Pan said, his voice cracking. Mr. Byun worked for my father. He remembered me. And I didn't even recognize him. Of course you didn't. He stopped being useful to you. He became invisible. Mary Beth pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. Pan realized she was making coffee for both of them. Even now, even during this. Do you know how many people your company has displaced in the last 5 years? Do you know their names, their stories? No, Pan whispered. Exactly. She set a mug in front of him. The gesture was automatic, habitual. I stay here, Mr. Pan, because the salary keeps them alive. It's not enough, but it's something. I work for you because I have to, not because I want to. Every day I come here and clean your floors and prepare your meals, and every night I take what you pay me and try to undo some of the damage your company does. Pan stared at the coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals. You're telling me I'm the enemy? Yes. No hesitation. No softness. Pancorp owns 17 buildings in Yeongdongpo, all of them slated for demolition. All of them full of people who have nowhere else to go. Your company doesn't see them as people. They're obstacles, inefficiencies. Blocks to be cleared so you can build parking lots and luxury apartments that none of them could ever afford. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Marybeth interrupted. There's a difference, Mr. Pan. You sign the permits. You approve the budgets. You sit in those meetings with Director Ryu and congratulate each other on your vision for urban renewal. You just never walk through the neighborhoods you're erasing. Pan's hands shook around the coffee mug. The demolition is scheduled for Thursday morning, 48 hours. I know. I've been trying to help them pack, trying to find places for them to go. Her voice finally broke, just a hairline fracture. Mrs. Baek has a cousin in Incheon who might take her. Mr. Choi's son won't return my calls. The little girl... She stopped, breathed. The little girl has no one. I've been calling every shelter in Seoul. They're all full. What's her name? Marybeth looked up, surprised. What? The little girl. What's her name? Hana. Her name is Hana. Pan nodded slowly. Hana. Not the little girl. Not a minor. A person with a name. I can stop it, he said. Marybeth's laugh was bitter. No, you can't. Director Ryu has the board behind him. The permits are final. The construction crews are contracted. You'd have to fight your entire company, risk your position, lose millions in projected revenue. And for what? For 23 people who don't contribute to your bottom line? For 23 people who deserve to exist? Pan said. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. Marybeth studied his face for a long moment. You mean that right now? In this moment, standing here, you believe it, but tomorrow, when Director Ryu puts the numbers in front of you, when the board questions your judgment, when the stockholders start calling, you'll remember why you built this empire, and you'll choose it over them. You always do. How do you know? Because, Marybeth said, picking up her coffee, I watched you make that choice every day for 20 years. I watched you become the kind of man who could sign a demolition order without asking who it would hurt. I watched you forget that your father's accountant exists. I watched you stop being human. She walked past him toward the living room, ready to start her day of cleaning. At the doorway, she paused. I'll work through the end of the week. That should give you time to find a replacement. Someone who won't embarrass you by caring about the wrong people. Then she was gone, leaving Pan alone in his perfect kitchen with cold coffee and the terrible understanding that she was right about everything. Pan stood in his kitchen for a long time after Marybeth left, her words echoing in the perfect silence of his penthouse. The coffee had gone cold in his hands. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul was waking up, the sun bleeding orange across the Han River, traffic beginning its daily crawl through the arterial streets, the city stretching and yawning into another day of ruthless efficiency. He heard Marybeth moving through the apartment, the familiar sounds of her routine, the vacuum cleaner starting in the living room, the soft clink of glass as she cleaned the windows, the swish of cloth against marble. 20 years of these sounds, and he'd never really heard them before, never thought about the body behind them, the life, the choices she made every day just to survive in a world he'd helped build. Pan's phone buzzed. Director Ryu, already awake, already working. The message was brief and triumphant. Demolition crews confirmed. Media list finalized. This is going to be a beautiful day for Pancorp. Pan deleted the message without responding. He walked to his office, pulled up the Yeongdaeongpo files on his computer. For the first time, he actually read them. Not just the financial projections and the revenue models, but the full site assessment. The photographs his development team had taken of Sector 9. Clinical shots that showed a building with structural damage, code violations, outdated electrical systems. Everything that justified demolition. But if you looked closer, and Pan was looking closer now, you could see other things. Laundry hanging in windows, a small garden of potted plants on a fire escape, a hand-painted sign that read, Community Meals, Tuesdays and Thursdays. evidence of life that the report had systematically ignored. The vacuum cleaner stopped. Pan glanced at his watch. 7:15 a.m. Mary Beth would be moving to the bedrooms now, then the bathrooms, then back to the kitchen to prepare his breakfast, which he usually ate while reading reports, not tasting anything. Fuel for his body while his mind worked on problems more important than food. He heard a sound, something between a gasp and a cry, then a crash. Pan was running before he consciously decided to move. He found Mary Beth on the kitchen floor, collapsed between the counter and the island. The vacuum cleaner had fallen with her, its cord stretched taut across the marble. Her body was twisted at an angle that looked wrong, one hand pressed against her chest, her face gray. Mary Beth! Pan dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering, not knowing where to touch, how to help. What happened? What's wrong? She tried to speak but couldn't form words. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Her lips had a blue tinge that made Pan's stomach drop. Don't move. I'm calling an ambulance. Pan fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Mary Beth's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. She shook her head, managed to force out 2 words. No ambulance. You need a hospital. Can't afford, she gasped, her face contorting with pain. Can't afford. Pan felt something break open inside his chest. I'll pay for it. Everything. He was already dialing, already shouting orders to his assistant who answered on the first ring. Get my car to the front entrance now. Call Seoul National University Hospital, VIP wing. Tell them I'm bringing someone. Have a cardiac team ready. He scooped Mary Beth up. She weighed almost nothing. Her body light in his arms like something already leaving. She tried to protest, tried to push away from him, but she was too weak. Pan carried her to the private elevator, his heart hammering against his ribs. The ride down felt eternal. Mary Beth's breathing was getting worse, more labored, her hand still pressed against her chest, and Pan could see her fingers trembling. Stay with me, he said. Please, just stay with me. His driver was waiting, car door open. Pan slid into the back seat with Mary Beth still in his arms. Seoul National. VIP entrance. Don't stop for anything. The city blurred past. Pan held Mary Beth against his chest, feeling her heartbeat irregular, stuttering, like an engine misfiring. He'd never been this close to her before, never noticed the silver in her hair, the deep lines around her eyes, the calluses on her hands from 20 years of labor in his home. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. The hospital was ready for them. Nurses with a gurney, a doctor already scrubbed in, the controlled chaos of medical emergency. They took Mary Beth from his arms, and Pan felt the absence like a wound. He tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. Sir, you need to wait here. We'll update you as soon as... I'm going with her. Sir, only family is allowed. I'm her employer. The words tasted like ash. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, I'm paying. Do you understand? Everything. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and led him to a private waiting area. Leather chairs, a flat-screen TV playing the morning news on mute, a coffee station with expensive beans, the room where wealthy people waited while their loved ones fought for their lives. Pan sank into a chair, his legs finally giving out. His hands were shaking. His suit, a different suit, the charcoal Zegna he'd put on that morning without thinking, was wrinkled from carrying Mary Beth. He didn't care. 20 minutes passed. 40, an hour. Finally, a doctor appeared. Young, competent-looking, holding a tablet. Mr. Pan? How is she? Stable for now. We've given her nitrates and beta blockers. Her heart rhythm is improving. The doctor paused, and Pan knew bad news was coming. Mr. Pan, when was the last time Miss Oscar saw a cardiologist? I don't know. Why? Because she has advanced coronary artery disease. Her charts show she was diagnosed 2 years ago and prescribed medication to manage the condition. The doctor pulled up records on his tablet, but she hasn't filled her prescriptions in 8 months. She's been living with this condition completely untreated. Pan felt the floor tilt beneath him. That's not she has health insurance. I provide health insurance to all my employees. The insurance covers most of it, but there's still a copay. About 150,000 won per month for her medications. The doctor's voice was carefully neutral. For some people, that's not an insignificant amount. 150,000 won. Pan spent more than that on a single dinner. On wine he barely tasted. On ties he wore once. She chose not to fill her prescriptions, Pan said slowly, because she couldn't afford it. That appears to be the case. And instead she spent that money on... He stopped. On food for Sector 9. On vegetables and tofu and kimchi for 23 people who had nothing. Mr. Pan, I need to be clear about something. If Miss Oscar had continued without treatment, she would have had a major cardiac event within the next few months. Possibly fatal. The doctor met his eyes. She was slowly killing herself. Pan couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the roaring in his ears. She's asking to see you, the doctor said. Room 1207, but please keep it brief. She needs rest. Pan nodded, not trusting his voice. He followed the doctor through sterile corridors to a private room overlooking the city. Mary Beth was in the bed, tubes running from her arms, monitors beeping softly. But she was awake, her eyes clear. You didn't have to do this, she said when she saw him. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Your heart medication. Pan's voice broke. You've been skipping it. For 8 months. Mary Beth looked away. It was a choice I made. You were choosing between your own heart and feeding them. Yes, that's not a choice anyone should have to make. But we do, Mr. Pan. Every day. People like me make choices like that every single day in the city you built. Pan pulled a chair close to her bed, sat down. His hands were still shaking. I'm stopping the demolition. I'm canceling the Yongdangpo project. All of it. Mary Beth's eyes widened. You can't. I can. I will. His voice was firm now, certain. Director Ryu will fight me. The board will fight me. I don't care. I'm not bulldozing their home. I'm not making Hana homeless. I'm not. His voice broke again. I'm not letting you die because you had to choose between your heart and theirs. A tear ran down Mary Beth's cheek. Just one. You'll lose everything. Maybe, Pan said. But I'll finally be worth something. She sacrificed her heart for others while the system failed her. If you can't stand a system that lets heroes suffer, hit subscribe and comment, Justice for Mary Beth. Don't let the Director Rios of the world win. Pan stayed with Mary Beth until the sedatives pulled her under. Her breathing evened out. The monitors settled into steady rhythms, and a nurse came to check her vitals with practiced efficiency. Everything stable. Everything under control. The opposite of how Pan felt. She'll sleep for several hours, the nurse said softly. You should get some rest yourself, Mr. Pan. You look exhausted. Pan nodded but didn't move. He sat in the chair beside Mary Beth's bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest. The IV drip feeding medication into her veins, medication she'd gone without for 8 months so strangers could eat. The morning sun climbed higher outside the window, painting the room in shades of gold that felt obscene given everything that had happened. His phone had been buzzing intermittently for the past hour. He'd ignored it, but now he pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a cascade of notifications. 12 missed calls from Director Ryu, 8 from his assistant, 6 from various board members, and 17 messages in the executive group chat. Pan's thumb hovered over the screen. Some instinct told him not to open it. To stay in this room, in this moment, where the only thing that mattered was the woman in the hospital bed and the choice he'd made to save her. But he opened it anyway. The messages loaded in reverse chronological order, and Pan's blood turned to ice as he read them. Director Ryu, 6:47 a.m. Pan isn't responding. This is unacceptable. We have a timeline to maintain. VP Development, 6:52 a.m. Should we proceed without his sign-off? The permits are finalized. Director Ryu, 6:54 a.m. Yes. Move the demolition to this afternoon, 2 p.m. I'll handle Pan. VP Development, 6:56 a.m. Afternoon? That's not in the schedule. The residents. Director Ryu, 6:57 a.m. The rats can scatter. That's their problem. I want those buildings down today. Before Pan gets sentimental about this project, Pan stared at the screen, his hands starting to shake again. He scrolled down, his stomach twisting with each new message. Director Ryu, 7:03 a.m. I've contacted the construction company. They're moving equipment to the site now. We'll have this wrapped up before the evening news cycle. Board Member Kim, 7:08 a.m. Is this wise? Moving without Pan's approval? Director Ryu, 7:10 a.m. Pan gave his approval 3 weeks ago when he signed the permits. He's just having cold feet. I'm protecting his interests and ours. The stockholders will thank us. VP Development, 7:15 a.m. Demolition Supervisor is asking about the occupants. Says there are still people in the building. Director Ryu, 7:16 a.m. Tell him to do his job. If they haven't evacuated by now, that's their choice. We gave them notice. VP Development, 7:18 a.m. The notice said Thursday morning. This is Wednesday afternoon. That's not legal. Director Ryu, 7:19 a.m. It's legal enough. By the time anyone complains, the building will be rubble. No building, no case. Simple. Pan felt bile rising in his throat. He kept scrolling, unable to stop, watching his company conspire to destroy people's lives ahead of schedule because Director Ryu was afraid Pan might develop a conscience. Director Ryu, 7:31 a.m. Where the hell is Pan? Someone find him. Assistant Lee, 7:35 a.m. He's at Seoul National Hospital. Something about his employee. Director Ryu, 7:37 a.m. His maid? Are you serious? He's playing nurse while we have a $1 billion project to execute? Board Member Choi, 7:42 a.m. Maybe we should wait. If Pan is dealing with a personal emergency, Director Ryu, 7:44 a.m. This is the emergency. Pan's been acting strange lately, questioning decisions, second-guessing strategy. I've seen this before young CEOs who inherit empires and then try to turn them into charities. We can't let that happen. Pancorp is a business, not a welfare organization. VP Development, 7:51 a.m. Demolition crew is on site. Equipment is ready, waiting for your order. Director Ryu, 7:52 a.m. Begin demolition at 2 p.m. Clear the building by any means necessary. I want this done today. Director Ryu, 7:53 a.m. And someone tell Pan if he wants to keep his position as CEO, he needs to remember who really runs this company. The board. Not his bleeding heart. Pan stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. A nurse looked up from the hallway, concerned, but Pan barely saw her. He was staring at the timestamp on the last message. 7:53 a.m. It was now 8:47 a.m. The demolition was happening in 5 hours, and they were calling the residents vermin. Rats to be scattered. Mrs. Beck, who'd raised 4 children and worked in a factory for 30 years. Mr. Choi, who could barely walk. Byun Sang-woo, his father's accountant, who'd given candy to a little boy who became a monster. Hana, 7 years old, with nowhere to go and no one to protect her except a woman who was unconscious in a hospital bed because she'd destroyed her own heart trying to save theirs. Pan's hands moved before his mind caught up. He opened a new message thread, typed with shaking fingers. Pan Kwan, 8:48 a.m. Director Ryu, stand down immediately. Cancel the demolition. This is a direct order from the CEO. The response came within seconds. Director Ryu, 8:49 a.m. With respect, Mr. Pan, I'm acting in the best interests of Pancorp and our shareholders. The demolition will proceed as scheduled. We can discuss your concerns at tomorrow's board meeting. Pan felt something cold settle into his chest, something hard and sharp. Director Ryu wasn't just defying him. He was calling Pan's bluff, betting that Pan wouldn't risk a public fight with his own executive team. That Pan would back down, save face, let it happen, because that's what the old Pan would have done. The Pan from yesterday. The Pan who signed permits without looking at photographs, who saw numbers instead of names. Pan typed a new message, this time to his assistant. Pan Kwan, 8:51 a.m. Lee, get me legal on the phone, now, and contact the construction company directly. Tell them if they touch that building, I will sue them personally for breach of contract and hold them liable for any injuries or deaths. Assistant Lee, 8:52 a.m. Sir, Director Ryu has already bet. Pan Kwan, 8:52 a.m. I don't care what Director Ryu has done. Get legal, get the construction company, and get me the home addresses of every board member. I'm calling an emergency meeting for 11 a.m. Mandatory attendance. Director Ryu, 8:54 a.m. Pan, you're making a mistake. Think about what you're doing. Pan Kwan, 8:55 a.m. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. The demolition does not happen today. If you proceed, I will fire you. In front of the board. In front of the media. In front of every shareholder. Your choice, Director Ryu. The group chat went silent. Pan could imagine them now, in their offices scattered across Seoul, staring at their phones in shock. The young CEO, the one they thought they could control, had just drawn a line in the sand. Pan's phone rang. Director Ryu. Pan declined the call. It rang again, declined, a third time. Pan answered. You're destroying this company. Director Ryu's voice was cold, controlled fury. Over 23 homeless people. Do you understand how insane that sounds? I understand that I've been destroying people for profit. Pan said. His voice was steady now, clear. "And I'm not doing it anymore. The board will vote you out. Maybe. But not before I stop this demolition. Not before I save their lives. They're not worth saving. They're parasites. Vermin feeding off." Pan hung up. His hands weren't shaking anymore. He looked at Mary Beth, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the war that had just begun. Unaware that her sacrifice had finally cracked open something in him that 20 years of success had sealed shut. He had 5 hours to stop the demolition. 5 hours to get to Sector 9 before the bulldozers arrived. 5 hours to choose between the empire he'd built and the humanity he'd lost. Pan grabbed his jacket and ran for the door. Pan's Mercedes tore through the streets of Seoul like a bullet, weaving between traffic, ignoring lights that had just turned red, the engine roaring with an urgency that matched the pounding of his heart. His driver had tried to counsel caution, but Pan had shoved him aside and taken the wheel himself. There was no time for caution. No time for the careful navigation of a professional driver who valued safety over speed. It was 1:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the demolition. Pan's phone kept ringing. Director Ryu, board members, his legal team trying to explain the complexities of stopping a permitted demolition. He ignored them all. His assistant had managed to contact the construction company, but they'd claimed their contract was with Director Ryu now, not Pan. Someone had changed the authorization chain. Someone had cut Pan out of his own company's decision-making process. The traffic thickened as he approached Yongdeungpo. Pan laid on the horn, swerving into the oncoming lane, barely missing a delivery truck. Horns blared behind him. He didn't care. In his mind, he kept seeing Hana's face. The little girl asking where food came from. 7 years old and about to lose the only shelter she had left. He turned onto the street leading to Sector 9, and his stomach dropped. The entire block was cordoned off. Orange barriers, yellow caution tape, 2 police cars with their lights flashing. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, phones out, filming. And there, like mechanical dinosaurs waiting to feed, sat 3 bulldozers, their engines already rumbling, black smoke coughing from exhaust pipes. Pan slammed on his brakes, abandoned his car in the middle of the street, and ran toward the barriers. A police officer stepped in front of him, hand raised. "Sir, this is a restricted construction zone. You need to." "I'm Pan Kwan. I own this building, this company, all of this." Pan's voice was raw. "The demolition is cancelled. Who's in charge here?" The officer hesitated, spoke into his radio. Pan didn't wait for a response. He ducked under the barrier and sprinted toward Sector 9. The building looked even more condemned in daylight. The walls were water-stained and crumbling. The windows were broken or boarded over. The demolition notice was plastered across the front door, and someone had spray-painted "condemned" in red letters across the facade. To anyone passing by, it looked like exactly what it was supposed to be: urban blight ready to be erased. But Pan knew better now. He knew about the warmth in that basement. The yellow light, the smell of soup and kimchi. The community that had formed in the cracks of his city's prosperity. The residents were outside. All of them. 23 people standing in a cluster near the building's entrance, surrounded by plastic bags and cardboard boxes that held everything they owned. Mrs. Bake sat on an overturned crate, her white hair bright in the afternoon sun, her face blank with shock. Mr. Choi leaned heavily on his homemade cane, arguing with a construction foreman. Byun Sang-woo stood at the edge of the group, arms crossed, jaw tight. And there was Hana, clinging to an elderly woman's hand, her pink jacket too large, her eyes wide and terrified as she watched the bulldozers inch closer. "Stop!" Pan shouted, running toward the nearest machine. "Stop the demolition!" The bulldozer driver looked down at him from the cab, confused, then spoke into a radio. The engine noise dropped to an idle but didn't shut off completely. Waiting, a construction supervisor approached, clipboard in hand, hard hat on. "Sir, you need to clear the area. We have authorization to proceed." "From who?" "Director Ryu. He's the project manager. He has full authority." "I'm the CEO of PanCorp." Pan pulled out his phone, showed his corporate ID badge on the screen. "I'm telling you to stand down. Now." The supervisor's face paled. He grabbed his radio. We have a situation here. The CEO is on site and he's saying nothing that matters." The voice cut through the chaos like a knife, cold, smooth, absolutely certain of itself. Pan turned and saw Director Ryu emerging from a black Genesis sedan parked across the street. 53 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Pan's. He walked toward them with the casual confidence of a man who'd already won. Pan. Director Ryu's smile was thin. I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you were playing Florence Nightingale at the hospital. Call off the demolition, Ryu. I'm afraid I can't do that. The board has reviewed your recent behavior and determined that you're not currently fit to make operational decisions. Ryu pulled a folded document from his jacket. This is a temporary suspension of your executive authority, signed by 6 of the 9 board members this morning. Until further notice. I'm acting CEO of PanCorp. The words hit Pan like a physical blow. They'd moved against him. While he was sitting in a hospital room, while he was racing across the city, they'd been consolidating power. You can't. I can. And I have. Ryu's smile widened. Now, I suggest you move your car before it's towed. We have work to do. Ryu turned toward the construction supervisor. Proceed with demolition. Clear the building. There are people here, Pan shouted. They have nowhere to go. They had 48 hours' notice. That's more than generous. Ryu glanced at the residents clustered near the building, and his expression was one of pure disgust. Look at them. Rats who found a hole to nest in. Well, we're filling the hole. They'll find another. Mrs. Bake made a small, wounded noise that carried across the construction site. Hana pressed closer to the elderly woman holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. And Director Ryu laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh exactly. It was worse than that. It was dismissive. The laugh of someone swatting away an irritating insect. The laugh of a man who'd spent so long seeing people as obstacles that their suffering had become background noise. Ryu, please. Pan's voice cracked. They're people. Human beings. You can't just... I can do whatever the board authorizes me to do. And right now they've authorized me to clean up the mess you were too weak to handle. Ryu waved to the construction supervisor. I want this building down in the next hour. If anyone interferes, have them arrested for trespassing. The bulldozer's engines revved. The massive machines began moving forward. Treads chewing up the cracked pavement, heading straight for the building where 23 people had found warmth and soup and someone who called them by name. Pan looked at the residents. At Mrs. Bake's defeated face, at Mr. Choi's helpless rage, at Byun Sang-woo, his father's accountant, watching the world destroy him one more time, at Hana, crying into the elderly woman's coat. And then Pan looked at Director Ryu, standing beside his luxury sedan, checking his watch like he had more important places to be. Something crystallized in Pan's chest, something hard and unbreakable. He started walking toward the bulldozers. Pan, what are you doing? Ryu's voice had an edge now. Get out of the way. Pan kept walking. The lead bulldozer was 20 feet from the building. 15, 10. Pan stepped directly into its path. The driver saw him, eyes widening, and jerked the controls. The bulldozer lurched to a stop, its blade just feet from Pan's body. The engine idled, black smoke billowing around Pan like fog. Mr. Pan! The driver shouted from the cab. Sir, you need to move. Pan didn't move. He stood there, his suit still wrinkled from carrying Marybeth. His expensive shoes planted in the dirt, his arms at his sides. Not aggressive, not threatening, just present, just refusing to disappear. Get him out of there, Director Ryu screamed. Security, police, someone remove him. 2 police officers approached, uncertain. One of them spoke into his radio. The other reached for Pan's arm. If you touch me, Pan said quietly, it will be on every news channel in Seoul within the hour. A CEO arrested for trying to stop his own company from demolishing people's homes. Is that the story you want to be part of? The officer's hand froze. He looked at his partner. They'd seen the cameras, the crowd of onlookers filming everything. This was already viral, or would be soon. Pan. Ryu was walking toward him now, fury replacing the smooth confidence. You're making a fool of yourself. The board will crucify you for this. Let them. Pan's voice was steady, calm. I'm not moving. Behind him, he heard movement, footsteps. He glanced back and saw Byun Sang-woo walking forward to stand beside him. Then Mr. Choi, limping on his cane. Then Mrs. Beck, moving slowly but with fierce determination. One by one, the residents of Sector 9 formed a line between the bulldozers and their home. Director Ryu's face turned purple. You're all trespassing. I'll have every one of you arrested. Then arrest us, Pan said. Arrest all of us, in front of all these cameras. Show the world what PanCorp really is. Director Ryu is laughing at their pain. If you can't stand bullies who pick on the weak, hit that like button right now. Comment, stand down, to wipe that smile off his face. If you're not a bully, prove it. The standoff lasted 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Pan and the residents of Sector 9 forming a human wall between the bulldozers and the building. Director Ryu was screaming orders that no one seemed willing to follow. The police officers spoke urgently into their radios, waiting for instructions from someone higher up the chain of command. And everywhere, phones held high, recording everything, broadcasting this moment to a city that was just beginning to pay attention. Pan's heart hammered in his chest, but his feet stayed planted. He could feel the heat from the bulldozer's engine, could smell the diesel and the disturbed earth. Behind him, he heard Mrs. Bake's labored breathing, Mr. Choi's cane tapping nervously against the ground, Hana's muffled sobs. Director Ryu's phone rang. He answered it, his face going from purple to white in the span of seconds. Yes, I understand. But we have permits. Yes, I. He lowered the phone slowly, his hand shaking with rage. The mayor's office is requesting we halt operations pending review. Apparently this is trending on social media. Pan felt a flicker of something. Not quite hope. Not yet, but possibility. Stand down, Ryu, Pan said. It's over. This isn't over. Ryu's voice was venomous. You think one viral video changes anything? The board will still vote you out. I'll still have this building demolished. All you've done is delay the inevitable and make yourself look like a radical. Maybe. Pan reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now. Certain. But let's make sure everyone knows exactly what they're voting for. He opened his social media app, the one his PR team managed, the one with 500,000 followers who tracked every move PanCorp made. He switched the camera to selfie mode, framed himself with the bulldozers and the residents behind him, and hit the live stream button. Don't you dare. Ryu started forward. But the police officers moved to intercept him, unsure whose authority superseded whose. My name is Pan Quan, Pan said into the camera. His voice was calm, clear. I'm the CEO of PanCorp, and I'm standing in Yeongdeungpo District, in front of a building my company was about to demolish. Behind me are 23 people who've been living here. Their names are Mrs. Bake, Mr. Choi, Byun Sang-woo, Hana. He turned the camera, panning across their faces, letting the city see them. Not as statistics, not as obstacles. As people. The viewer count was climbing. 500, 1,000, 3,000. Pan turned the camera back to himself. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. I've been a terrible CEO. Not because I wasn't profitable. PanCorp has had record earnings for 5 consecutive years. But because I forgot what profit was supposed to be for. I forgot that buildings are meant to shelter people, not replace them. I forgot that the word development is supposed to mean making lives better, not making lives disappear. 10,000 viewers, 15,000. The woman who raised me, who's worked in my home for 20 years, is in the hospital right now because she stopped taking her heart medication so she could afford to feed the people standing behind me. She made that choice in a city where a parking lot is worth more than human life. In a city I helped build. Director Ryu was screaming into his phone now, but no one was listening to him. The construction workers had climbed down from their bulldozers and were watching Pan's live stream on their own phones. The police officers stood frozen, unsure whether to stop a CEO from incriminating himself or to let him continue. 25,000 viewers. The comments were flooding in faster than Pan could read them. Director Ryu, my VP of Operations, called these residents vermin this morning. He ordered this demolition moved up ahead of schedule because he was afraid I might develop a conscience. He was right to be afraid. Pan turned the camera toward Ryu, who was now being physically restrained by 2 police officers after lunging toward Pan. Director Ryu, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from all PanCorp properties, and legal will be in touch about your breach of fiduciary duty. Pan's voice was steady. Final. You don't get to destroy people and call it business anymore. Not in my company. Ryu's screaming became incoherent. The police officers pulled him toward his luxury sedan, and Pan turned the camera back to himself. 50,000 viewers. The news vans were arriving now. He could see them parking at the barriers, reporters grabbing their equipment, rushing toward the scene. I'm announcing today that Sector 9 and all 17 other properties PanCorp owns in Yeongdeungpo District are being transferred to a community trust. They will not be demolished. They will be renovated, brought up to code, and converted into permanent, affordable housing. The residents who've been living here will have first right of occupancy, rent-free, for life. The crowd behind the barriers erupted. Some people cheering, some people shouting questions, everyone trying to process what they were witnessing. This will cost Pancorp approximately 400 million won in lost development revenue. Our stockholders will not be happy. Our board of directors will likely vote me out at the emergency meeting they've called for tomorrow morning. That's fine. I'd rather lose my position than lose my humanity. 75,000 viewers. 100,000. Pan turned the camera one more time to show the residents. Mrs. Baek had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Choi had collapsed onto his cane, shaking. Byun Sung-woo was staring at Pan like he was seeing a ghost or maybe seeing a person for the first time. And Hana had broken free from the elderly woman's hand and was running toward Pan. She crashed into his legs, wrapping her small arms around him, and Pan nearly dropped his phone. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, keeping the camera rolling. "Are we safe?" Hana asked, her voice small and broken. "Do we get to stay?" Pan's vision blurred. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "You promise?" "I promise." The words came out rough. "You get to stay. All of you get to stay." Hana hugged him then, really hugged him, and Pan held her with one arm while keeping the camera steady with the other. He wanted everyone watching to see this, to see what was actually at stake when development plans moved forward. Not abstract urban renewal initiatives, not underutilized properties, but 7-year-old girls who just wanted to know if they'd have a home tomorrow. Pan stood up, lifting Hana with him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and wouldn't let go. "I'm going to the hospital now," Pan said to the camera. "I need to tell Mary Beth that the people she sacrificed her heart for are safe, that her choice wasn't in vain, that someone finally saw what she's been seeing all along, that these lives matter more than my profit margins." He looked directly into the lens, into the eyes of 150,000 people watching, to the board of directors of Pancorp. "You want to fire me? Fine. But I'm not signing another demolition permit. I'm not displacing another family. I'm not building another luxury tower on top of someone else's only home. If that makes me a bad CEO, then I don't want to be a good one." He ended the live stream. The silence that followed felt enormous, broken only by the sound of Hana crying softly into his shoulder and the distant wail of more sirens approaching. The construction supervisor approached cautiously. "Mr. Pan, what should we do with the equipment?" Pan looked at the bulldozers, their blades still raised, ready to destroy. Then he looked at the building behind him, decrepit, condemned, but full of life that mattered. "Pack it up," he said. "The demolition is cancelled, permanently." But Director Ryu said, "Director Ryu doesn't work here anymore." Pan shifted Hana's weight in his arms. She was so light, too light. "From now on, those machines won't tear down. They build up, starting here, starting now." The supervisor nodded slowly and began issuing orders. The bulldozer's engines cut off one by one, the sudden silence almost shocking. Mrs. Baek approached Pan, moving slowly, her face wet with tears. She took his free hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Pan shook his head. "I'm the one who should be apologizing. I'm the one who almost..." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, for all of it." "You stood in front of the bulldozers," Mr. Choi said, limping forward. "That's more than sorry. That's redemption." Byun Sung-woo was the last to approach. Pan's father's accountant. The ghost from a past Pan had tried to forget. They looked at each other for a long moment. "Your father would be proud," Byun said quietly. "Not of what you built, but of what you just destroyed." Pan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The news reporters were breaching the barriers now. Cameras rolling, microphones extended. Pan didn't run from them. He stood there, holding Hana, surrounded by the people he'd almost erased, and answered every question. Yes, he'd just fired his VP. Yes, he'd transferred millions in assets to a community trust. Yes, he expected to be voted out. Yes, he'd do it all again. Because some things, Pan had finally learned, were worth more than keeping your empire. Some things were worth losing everything for. 3 months later, Pan stood in front of what used to be called Sector 9 and barely recognized it. The crumbling facade had been replaced with clean brick. The boarded windows now held actual glass that caught the autumn sunlight. The spray-painted condemned sign was gone, replaced by a hand-carved wooden plaque that read, Oscar Community Center, in both Korean and English. Below it, in smaller letters, a place where everyone belongs. The board had voted him out, just as he'd predicted, 6-3, with 2 abstentions. The vote had taken place the morning after the live stream, in an emergency session that lasted 4 hours and ended with Pan clearing out his office at Pancorp Tower while security watched. He'd walked out with a cardboard box containing a photo of his mother, the pen she'd given him when he graduated university, and nothing else that mattered. The stockholders had sued. Director Ryu had sued. The business press had written obituaries for his career, calling him everything from admirable but naive to a cautionary tale about mixing emotion with enterprise. His Wikipedia page now included a section titled Controversial Departure from Pan Corp. Pan didn't care about any of it. He pushed open the front door of the Oscar Center and was immediately hit with the smell of fresh paint and cooking soup. The basement had been transformed, new floors, proper lighting, industrial kitchen equipment that actually met health codes. But more importantly, it was full. Not just with the original 23 residents, but with 40 more people who'd heard about the center and found their way here. People who'd been sleeping in subway stations, in PC bangs, under bridges. People the city had forgotten. Mr. Pan. Hana came running across the common room, her pink jacket replaced with a new purple one that actually fit. Her hair was clean and braided, her face had filled out. She looked like a child should look, safe, fed, loved. Come see what I drew. Pan let her drag him to the art corner. A new edition funded by a donation from someone who'd seen the live stream and wanted to help. Hana's drawing showed a building with people in every window, all of them smiling. At the bottom, in careful hangul, she'd written, "My home. It's beautiful," Pan said, his throat tight. Miss Mary Beth helped me with the spelling. Hana pointed across the room. Mary Beth was there, setting tables for dinner. She moved slowly, carefully. But she moved. The color had returned to her face. Her smile came easier now. She was wearing regular clothes, jeans, and a simple blouse, not a uniform. She'd quit working for Pan the day after he'd been voted out, not because she was angry, but because she said he didn't need a maid anymore. He needed a partner. She'd been right. Pan walked over to her, grabbed an extra stack of plates, and started setting the tables beside her. They'd fallen into this rhythm over the past 3 months, working side by side. Not employer and employee, but two people who'd finally learned to see each other. How was the meeting with the housing authority? Mary Beth asked, arranging napkins. Frustrating. They approved the permits for the renovation of Building 3, but they're pushing back on Building 4. Something about zoning restrictions. Pan set down a plate with more force than necessary. They make it so hard to help people. It's like the system is designed to maintain poverty, not solve it. Now you're learning. Mary Beth's smile was gentle. Welcome to the world the rest of us have been living in. Mrs. Bake emerged from the kitchen carrying a large pot of stew. She'd become the de facto head chef of the community center, her spicy kimchi now legendary among the residents. Dinner is ready. Everyone wash hands. The residents gathered the original 23 plus the new arrivals, ranging from elderly to young. All of them with stories that would break your heart if you listened long enough. Pan had listened to all of them. Knew all their names now. Knew who liked extra rice, who couldn't eat spicy food, who needed the corner seat because crowds made them anxious. Mr. Choi said grace, his voice stronger than it had been 3 months ago. Regular meals and a warm place to sleep had added years back to his life. Byun Sang-woo sat beside him, wearing glasses he could finally afford, reading a newspaper he'd picked up that morning. The headline was about PanCorp's stock price. It had dropped 23% in 3 months without Pan's leadership. The article called it, "Predictable Market Correction Following Erratic CEO Behavior." Byun caught Pan looking and folded the newspaper. "You don't need to read that garbage." "I know." And Pan did know. He'd stopped checking stock prices, stopped reading the business press, stopped measuring his worth in quarterly earnings. "How's the accounting coming?" "Slowly. I'm rusty." Byun had agreed to help Pan manage the trust's finances, rebuilding skills he hadn't used in years. "But I'll get there. We'll make this work." Pan nodded. They would make it work. They had to. The meal was loud and chaotic and perfect. People talking over each other, laughing, arguing about who got the last piece of kimchi. Hana sat between Pan and Mary Beth, her plate piled high, eating with the enthusiasm of someone who'd known hunger and never wanted to feel it again. After dinner, while others cleaned up, Pan and Mary Beth walked to the rooftop garden, another new addition. Someone had donated seeds and soil, and now there were tomatoes growing in old tire planters, lettuce in wooden boxes, herbs in whatever containers people could find. It wasn't much, but it was green and growing and alive. They sat on a bench someone had built from reclaimed wood, looking out over Yeongdeung-po. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. From up here, you could see other buildings Pan was working to save. Building 3, halfway through renovation. Building 4. Still fighting with the bureaucracy. 12 more after that. You gave up everything, Mary Beth said quietly. Your company, your wealth, your reputation. I gave up things that were killing me. Pan looked at his hands calloused now from construction work, paint under his fingernails that wouldn't wash out. I didn't even realize I was dying until you showed me how to live. You could have just written a check, made a donation, kept your distance. No, I couldn't. Not anymore. Pan met her eyes. You spent 20 years showing me what it meant to care about people. I was just too blind to see it. Mary Beth reached over and took his hand. Her grip was strong, steady. Her heart was healing. How was your day? She asked. And Pan realized this was the first time anyone had asked him that question, and actually wanted to know the answer. Exhausting, beautiful, frustrating, perfect. He squeezed her hand. How was yours? The same. She smiled. Exactly the same. They sat there as the sun dropped below the horizon, and lights began flickering on across the city. Seoul, still ruthless, still divided between the glass towers and the forgotten streets. But here, in this small corner of Yeongdongpo, something different was growing. A community, a family, a place where people who'd been told they were worthless discovered they were priceless. Below them, through the rooftop door, Pan could hear singing. Someone had a guitar. The residents were gathered in the common room, making music from instruments that had been donated. Voices that had been silenced finding their sound again. Hannah appeared in the doorway. Miss Mary Beth, Mr. Pan, come sing with us. Mary Beth stood, pulling Pan up with her. Coming. They went back down into the warmth, into the light, into the noise and chaos of people learning how to live again. Pan picked up Hannah, spun her around until she shrieked with laughter, then set her down and let her drag him into the circle of singers. He didn't know any of the songs. His voice was terrible. He was off-key and off-rhythm, and completely, perfectly happy. Because this room full of people who society had discarded, this building he'd almost destroyed, this community that shouldn't exist according to every business principle he'd ever learned, this was the only empire worth building. Later, much later, after everyone had gone to bed and the building was quiet except for the hum of the new heating system, Pan stood at the entrance of the Oscar Community Center. The wooden plaque caught the streetlight, the carved letters casting shadows. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Saw your live stream. Have a building full of people about to be evicted in Incheon. Can you help? Pan looked up at the windows of the center, each one glowing with warm light. 43 lives that were safe tonight. 43 people who had homes. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was a start. He typed back, "Send me the address. I'm on my way." Then Pan Kwan, former billionaire CEO, current volunteer and guardian of the forgotten, locked the door behind him and walked into the Seoul night, ready to stand in front of another bulldozer if that's what it took. Because he'd finally learned what his mother had tried to teach him before she died, what Mary Beth had shown him through 20 years of quiet service, what Hannah had proven with one simple question. Everyone deserves to be home. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to matter. And if the world disagreed, Pan would spend the rest of his life proving the world wrong. Pan changed his heart, but many wouldn't. If you believe in second chances and redemption, hit subscribe. Let's build a community of kindness right here in the comments. Say welcome home if you're with us.